The Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast is proudly sponsored by New Vision.
My team, Conda, power. I love the power. I love the power.
Welcome to the Big Footy podcast, which really isn't a podcast because we're live streaming. So why we keep calling it a podcast, I don't know. But tonight we have a fantastic show in store for all of us and you guys listening as well. We've got myself, obviously, Fishing Rick back, which is always going to be shadowed compared to the two guests we've got on. I'll introduce our new guest for tonight. We've got Nick, the man, RussellEbertHandball from the Big Footy boards. How are you, mate?
I'm composed, Rick, composed.
Excellent. You're not too nervous being in the presence of royalty here with Portia?
No, I've been listening to our boys speak all pre-season and how we have to be composed, so I'm trying to live the creed.
Excellent. And joining us, obviously, with Nick and myself, we have Portia tonight. How are you, Portia?
I'm good, but the tea bag in my tea just broke, so I'm making another cup.
Oh my God, that is just disastrous.
I know. I use the good milk too, I should point out. It's super bad. Yeah.
And it's good to have you front up 2 weeks in a row. So I appreciate your contribution, and I'm sure Craig is spinning in his car at the moment, missing out on all the fun and action. So
that's it.
He'll be back. So what I thought we'll start off with tonight is. I've given my opinion, so there's nothing I need to really say about this, but I know you guys have been obviously long-term Port supporters and, you've got some thoughts on Phil Walsh, and Nick, you probably had a few conversations with Phil Walsh, I would imagine, so I thought I'd pass it over to Nick and Portia for you guys to have a bit of a word or your piece on what you wanted to say.
I've only ever had one conversation, that was at the Club 1870 event last year. The 10 years that Phil was at our club the first time round, I lived in Sydney, so I reckon I only heard him once on a radio interview talk. And I know Portia and a couple of others have written about his infamous, I think it was against Geelong in 2001, pre-game chat that he gave where the super intense Phil Walsh went over the top and sort of startled a few people. But I reckon that's, there's a lot of things about what happened and sadness and the sun and all that, but the thing that really stands out is that before he got coach, nobody, because of his lack of media presence, nobody in terms of fans really knew who Phil Walsh was. They knew he was some sort of master tactician, but he was an enigma almost to most fans. The overwhelming majority of Port fans, footy fans, West Coast fans, and it wasn't until he got signed up as coach that you heard him, and I got to talk to him for 15 minutes, and Ford Fairlane and past my prime stayed another 15 minutes when we were down in the change rooms in April last year at Adelaide Oval. I thought we were going to get kicked out, so I wanted to have a look around, but fascinating 15 minutes. And then his persona came out, and then Eddie Dingle rang me at about 7:10 Friday morning. My alarm didn't go off at 7, and he said, "What the hell's going on down there in Adelaide?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Phil Walsh has been killed." I thought he was just pissed off with we'd lost and he was joking around. And he said, "Turn on the TV, turn on the radio." And just stunned for the whole day. Just stunned.
It was a bit of a flattening event, really, and I can understand that. And I think most of the footy world was and supporters were stunned. What's your take on it, Portia?
Well, look, it's an absolute tragedy for everyone. Like, there's no winners in this, basically. There's no victims or villains or anything like that. And I know, obviously, there is one person that's a bit more of a victim than everyone else, but it's not about that. I guess it's just a real reality check, I think, for a lot of people in terms of those familial relationships that you have, and just really... what is it? The song "The Cat's in the Cradle" and all that sort of thing. You read about it after the event, and of course, I certainly knew none of this, and I doubt most people did, about how he, I suppose, felt he neglected his son when he was being the coach for Port Adelaide, and that's not great. That's not great. That's sort of in the same ballpark as what we did with Bowen Lockwood, and sort of how he's got constant pain now because of the way we sort of looked after him. It doesn't feel good as a club I don't think, to feel that you've had this sort of adverse effect on anyone, and then for it to have such a horrific result is just a real eye-opener, and I'd hope that's really an eye-opener across the league as to what's being expected of coaches to a large extent, and how much you ask of any one individual. I suppose it worked generally, quite honestly, because he would not be on his own lonesome for that sort of unfortunate relationship. But as far as Phil Walsh as a part of the Port Adelaide Football Club, I think it'd be hard to think of a lot of coaches, certainly non-head coaches, that I'd have more respect for than Phil Walsh. I met him once, and he's the sort of person I really could have done with the meeting when I was about, I suppose, 11 or 12, and thought that all footballers were dickheads that didn't really know anything, because he's one of the most intelligent people I think I've spoken to for the most part. So, it's a real tragedy what's happened, and it's time for a bit of thinking, I think, just to really appreciate what's happened there.
So without going into the game style and everything else for this weekend, I guess I just want to quickly ask, what do we think about the boys? How the boys going to sort of handle this week? Do you think it's going to be a positive motivator for them? Do you think it's going to be a negative motivator? Obviously it's tough, but this is what happens. We have to keep persevering.
I think it's going to be an amplifier of whatever's going on. So I'm sure that they'll go out and they'll play extremely hard, probably too hard, and they might get in front, or they might fall behind. But whatever happens, it's just going to happen more so, I think. Just that emotional intensifier of this sort of tragedy. Just you never know what's going to happen exactly, but you know whatever is going to happen, it's going to be quite a bit larger than you expect it to be. So it could be a massive win, it could be just a bunch of really strong early contests that sort of fade out because not the motivation's lost, but the feeling that was there that needed to get out has been expressed, and then you're just left blank. It's really tough to tell, and honestly, it's kind of good in a way that our season's sort of over at this point, because if we still had finals on the line, I just don't know how they'd deal at all. Whereas this week they can sort of go out, and I really don't like saying this about a Port Adelaide football side, but they can sort of go out there and just play as well as they can and just do the best they can, and I don't think anyone will bag them if it's not all that good.
So you're obviously in my camp where you've given up on expecting finals this year. Nick, are you the same?
Oh yeah, pretty much. I mean, it would be nice to think that we could win 8 or 9 in a row, but I can't. Look, if we could kick at 70% every game, then we can win it. But how do you improve your kicking from terrible to average in such a short period? We can talk all we like about game plans, individuals, everything. But until we get our kicking right, everything else is almost irrelevant, because it's football. It's not handball. It's not throw ball. It's not punch ball. It's not hit ball. It's football. So you've got to get using your foot, the ball, kicking the ball with your foot correctly. I mean, you have a look. I've sort of said on the board about, it's a marginal 5 or 10% increase. Improvement. You roughly have 200 kicks a game. So to improve your efficiency by 10%, or to take it from 51 to 61, so not 10% of 51% increase, but 10% of the total, it means you've got to put 20 better kicks. If we had to kick the ball 10 times better into our forward line, especially in that, must have been the last quarter, we were going to left of screen, and then the guy who catches marks the ball, kicks it properly, that's potentially 10 better goals. That's how fine line it sometimes can be. And I said, until we get our kicking up to AFL average, finals is a dream.
I kind of agree, but I really hope you're not saying that's all a skills argument, because there's so many things that go into kicking well beyond just the actual mechanics of it. Like how you deliver the ball, how hard did you have to run before you kick, and all that sort of stuff as well. And that does come down to game plan and your structure and all that sort of stuff.
It sort of does, but when you've got no pressure on you, and you see someone up in your forward line, and you go and kick to them, and they're only 20 metres away, and you've got another option 40 metres away, and you kick the ball in between the two, that's got nothing to do with pressure.
It comes down to that's pressure and perceived pressure, though. That's the thing. Like pressure, you might not have someone on your tail, and you might even do better if someone was. But the fact that it's all on you all of a sudden, which I think is very much a concern that a lot of our players seem to have, is taking responsibility for that disposal. That is pressure, regardless of how it comes.
But if they've been playing footy since under 10, they would have had to do that every week. They play footy since under 10.
How many times do they get paid $300,000 a year?
Yeah, but that's you've got to be able to sort of, just play the basics.
They've got to be able to, absolutely, but to act like there's not a lot else riding on it apart from just a pure skill check, I don't think that's genuine. I don't think that's accurate.
Well, I understand when there's pressure. I understand there's perceived pressure. But when you can't even do the basics right, then you need remedial lessons.
This wasn't our debate section, guys. I had this coming up. You're throwing my whole segments out of whack now.
That's the beauty of live radio, you see.
It is the beauty of live radio. And so I guess I just brought it up because I'm still seeing posters getting caught into stuff that I probably did the last time we were successful and going, oh, well, if we go back to last year's form, we'll be all right and we can still make finals. Well, the problem is we're not nowhere anywhere near the form we were in last year, in 2014. So, I appreciate the optimism, and I think it's great that people can be optimistic. But I think we're struggling. But seeing these two are in a competitive mode, I thought I would bring up a new segment for the show, a quick segment. And I know I've got someone who wants to call in, so if they're listening, hold on a couple of minutes and then you can call in and ask a question as well. But seeing we've got two vocal debaters here, I wanted to have a quick debate from Todd Bell, who I'm sure is on Big Footy as well, but I don't know who he is on Big Footy. He asked, can you two debate nature versus nurture? Because he believes, Portia, you're in the nature camp of drafting the right players, and he thinks REH, you're into the nurture camp and with the training, and you're adamant we need to get John Donoghue in with the tackling. So Portia, off you go. Can we nurture, or is it more predominantly nature to get to where we want to go?
It's both, which is not an answer you want, I know, Rick, but it is both.
Yeah. But you need to have the basics right in the beginning, don't you?
Yeah, well, that's the case on both sides of that, though. So, yeah, you need to have the basic skills to play Australian rules football, and you need to show that you can execute those skills. But at the end of the day, you also need to have, the physical traits that are required to play Australian rules football as well. And I suppose the classic, absolutely on my side right now example is someone like Hugh Minson, who had the build of, what do you call them, the otter? The little standing up, prairie dogs. And just, very narrow shoulders, very light frame. And you can teach him to tackle all you want, but at the end of the day, he's going to struggle to be a ruckman. He can put muscles on, do whatever he wants, but without the right frame, there's a real limit, a real cap on what he can potentially do. And I suppose another one would be Brett Ebert with his height. A lot of these are insurmountable by no matter how much training you have. But certainly if you fall within the realm of people that have an AFL appropriate build, then the training is enormous, and that's the biggest difference between a first round success and a first round failure.
Nick?
Well, I think the argument is it's both. The question is what sort of list do you have? If you've got a highly skilled list, you don't have to probably work as hard. You still have to work hard. You don't become a champion at an elite level without working your ass off. Now the question is, how much do you rely back off on the training because you've got wonderful natural ability? You've got the ability like a Sean Burgoyne to hit targets under pressure through small gaps, or as we remember Stewie Dew, who probably didn't work as hard as he should have, but he was a natural footballer and he had a great kick. At the end of the day, you can take it probably is a bit easier to take somebody with natural ability and make them work rather than, and get to a top level, rather than have somebody with no ability or limited ability, and all you do is work. You just have to work hard. You also have to work smart. That's the other thing. There's no point doing it's the old efficient and effective. being effective is doing the right thing. Being efficient is doing it well. So if you're ineffective and you're doing the wrong thing, but you're efficient and you're doing it really, really well, you get nowhere. And that's what I'm frustrated about. What I watch is how effective is our training. There are areas in our game, both last year, the year before, we came from a bad base, a low base, where we weren't really effective. We might have worked our arse off and worked hard, but I think you have to work hard and smart.
Yep, totally agree.
You know, I've seen plenty of people work hard in life and they've done okay, but they haven't necessarily worked smart. If they had been smart, they would have done better. I've also seen plenty of people being smart and have been smart enough to bludge and cut corners, and they do all right as well. But I think at elite sport, you get caught out if you're not effective and efficient.
Yeah, well, we're the premierships, aren't we?
This isn't Quanda or whatever it is. You guys are supposed to be debating, not bloody agreeing with each other. Al reckons you're a fence sitter, Portia. You need to make a decision. I guess the other way to have a bit of a debate is, Portia, do you and I agree with Nick? He's been very passionate the last 2 weeks about getting John Donoghue in as a tackling coach. Is that the answer to our problems? We need to get someone else in, a different voice, to get aggressive at the boys and rev them up and help them with their tackling and other bits.
I definitely do not agree with that. I'll explain why. Sorry.
Awesome.
So if we go back over the past 3 senior coaches at Port Adelaide, I would say that all of Choco, Matty Primus and Ken Hinkley, you would describe mostly as motivational coaches. Like, that's their strength, is the ability to motivate the guys and really get on side with them and, I suppose, speak to them and communicate to them. And the weakness we probably have had, and the reason why Phil Walsh has come in as an assistant under 2 of them, is that we have had a strategical weakness that has been made up for by an assistant. So adding another motivator, that's great, and I'd expect to get a short-term result out of it, but I'm not sure that's where we could best spend money as a club right now. In particular on tackling, which I know it's important, but if you're taking a tackle, that's another ball that you're not getting, you know. You might get a free, but relying on anything that requires umpire intervention for it to work out to your advantage is probably not a good plan for Port Adelaide side. I'd much rather that we spent that time on, I suppose, making the development coaches more accountable and the line coaches more effective in how they're communicating what they're trying to do, which I think is probably the biggest problem we've got right now. I know there's probably some discontent with the leaders from the side, but I think it's really on the coaches at this point. And I think that's where we need to see the improvement, not with a player motivation thing like getting in the tackling coach. Although I'm not saying it'd be terrible, but I just don't think it's the priority.
Well, before Nick, you respond, I'll just add this one bit to that where I sort of agree with you, Portia, because I guess technically you could be a champion player who receives an instruction from a coach and can implement that instruction on the field for themselves and for other players. Yep. That doesn't necessarily mean that person is going to be able to swap roles, become a fantastic coach, which can create the strategies and implement the discussion with the players and pass that on for those players to then implement the strategy. So I guess what I'm saying is you can be a fantastic player. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a fantastic coach. And is that maybe an issue? Is there a communication issue potentially between the coaches and the players at the moment, which we maybe haven't had in previous seasons? I guess that's where I'm going. But Nick, over to you about your response with John Donoghue and why you think it's so important.
Well, okay. Look at who our coaches are and our assistant coaches. Are they going to develop strategy straight away to help us for the next 3 weeks? You would have thought that they would have been planning and implementing over pre-season and early on in the year. Now, I don't know whether there's a lack of communication. Guys aren't listening, guys aren't motivated. But you would think there's something not going through. The reason why I've called for, John Donoghue to come in full-time is, one, he can come in full-time. The other guys are there already full-time and working on things, and it doesn't seem to be working. You get John Donoghue in for 3 weeks, more just he's got a sadomasochistic streak. It's almost like the players might be scared not to let him down because they know they'll get flogged harder. I know flogging players for a whole season isn't the answer, but the way we've been ragdolled, especially Carlton was a lack of motivation. There's nothing to do with strategy. The guys just weren't interested, and when they were, they turned it on for bits and pieces. But they let the Carlton guys said, right, our season's been rubbish. We've got a new coach. We caused the coach to be sacked. The one thing we can do today is hit hard and give an effort. And that's why I'm just saying Donahue to come in for a full time for a few weeks is because we're not going to change strategy. That's what you spend your whole pre-season setting up for.
Mm.
But to get someone in now to complement the coaches, isn't that almost saying that the coaches aren't able to do it and we need to get someone else in to do it for them, which seems a bit odd?
Well, the runs are on the board. They haven't been able to do it.
I guess just one thing you said there regarding, I suppose, putting a bit of fear into the players. I think that if we're looking at the AFL journey, that's been the number one problem that Port has had, is that there's been too much fear in the players. Like we saw it in 2002, 2003, where that fear basically crippled them. And 2004, they came so close to losing that prelim. And we just constantly, you can see that we're coming from a place of fear, like we're afraid of what's going to happen if we don't do well, and then we just don't do well. And fear is an awful motivator for people. It's really terrible. You do just enough to survive, and then once you're surviving, you sort of fall apart because you're not doing something for someone. Whereas John Cale, I don't reckon he ever coached by fear. He might have got up a few people and certainly threatened to drop him or trade him or whatever else, but when they're playing on the field, they weren't playing out of fear. They were playing because they wanted to do well and they wanted to impress Jack and they wanted to impress the club and they wanted to do it for all the good reasons. And I think that's, if anything you want to inject into that side right now, that's what you want to do, is get them to realise again, like they did when we moved to Adelaide Oval, that, this is worth playing for and that, you're playing for yourself and it's not about fear. It's about not giving into it and just doing the best you can. I think that's really the lesson they need to hear right now.
I'm a great believer in the old Franklin Delano Roosevelt thing that he said in his inauguration speech, that the greatest thing to fear is fear itself. I'm a great believer in that. But a bit of fear doesn't go astray. You have a look, you talk about John Cale. John Cale, in Sandfield games, he used to get up at the club and he used to line the players up and go through each player, what they did well and poorly in the games. And that included games that we lost. You can't do that today. So there was a fear motivator when John Cale was around. Those premierships just didn't come because, he was a great motivator and it could make everybody walk 10 feet tall. There was a fear element to his coaching style. I guess what I'm saying is we're going to look. We have a shocking record against Sydney. We have a shocking record against Collingwood since we won the flag. And those sides are able to both physically and mentally get on top of us. That's why I said, let's get Johnny Donahue in for a couple of weeks of full time so that our guys are just driven, because mentally we're not strong at the moment. So as a minimum, let's get a bit physically stronger in terms of our desire and want an attack on the ball and the man with the ball. That's why I don't think you need John Donahue in there. It's 8 hours a day, 40 weeks a year. I'm not saying that. The reason I said to come in is because we're at a point whereby we're playing well in patches, but we're not playing well enough and hard enough for long enough.
Well, maybe tonight's changes might put some people on edge and help with that. So we'll segue right into the selections for this week. So we've got Amon in, Cleary in, Need in, O'Shea and Tringove, with Cleary and O'Shea starting on the ground in the back lines. Bobby Carlisle's out, saying it's back related. Sammy Cahoon, Tom Jonas, Nathan Cracker and Andrew Moore. So I wouldn't mind just going through those outs very quickly with you both. Andrew Moore out. Is he in trouble at Port Adelaide? His career I'm talking about.
He kind of already was, so there's no real change there.
He's a marginal player. He hasn't been able to crack our best 18. He's 19 to 22. He might even be 16 to 22. And even though he played all 3 finals last year. Even then, he was still a bench player, sub player, rather than a starting 18 player.
I think that Andrew Moore is one of those players that we could see 3 years in. We should have just offloaded him while he still had some value, and we didn't, and he's still with us.
So what about Sammy Cahoon?
I'm surprised at that because I thought the coach liked it. My criticism of Sam is that when he's got the ball, he seems to do okay. I notice things that he doesn't do correctly when he doesn't have the ball.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Cahoon, quite honestly. I don't think he does enough. Which I suppose agrees with what Russ is saying. I don't think he's got. He hasn't got the size, basically. We'll go back to that nature versus nurture thing. He hasn't got the size to really play that sort of role. If he was a small forward, I'd say that's no worry, but I'm just not convinced he's got the build to be worth having in that outside role when you could have someone with genuine speed that maybe needs a bit of work. I'd much rather draft someone on the rookie list that's a good runner with speed and just try and turn them into a footballer than play Cahoon, quite honestly. If we could get, what's his name, the Irish bloke back, that'd be great, but, something like that. I just don't see it. I just don't think that Cahoon's got enough anything to make it.
I like his aerobic ability, and I like the fact that he can contribute to the link-up play, but his body size is actually a bit of a concern because he's going to get ragged old and pushed off the play quite a bit. I guess Alipati Carlisle, if he's injured, that's a pretty obvious choice. Then there's not too much to say there. And obviously he got pants last week against Sydney, so there's no point playing someone if they're injured. So we probably don't need to talk too much about that one. And I guess then we get to two of the more controversial ones. We've got Tommy, the leadership group Jonas, where Alistair's harassing me, Portia, for you to say that you were wrong and he was right after last week's comments. But thoughts?
No, I don't think he's going to learn a single thing at SANFL level. So no. But that was the rationale that Al used last week, which is drop him back to the SNFL and he'll find a touch, and he won't. He won't come back any different to how he was.
Oh my God, he's going to fire up now. There's going to be tweets and texts and everything. Look, I think he had to go though. He was becoming a massive liability in the side, and I want him in the team as much as anybody because when in form he's a great player. But I think he had to go. Your thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, he had to go, and I still reckon he's carrying that groin. And if he is, he's better out for 3 or 4 weeks getting that right. You can just tell with his kicking. He's not kicking the ball properly. He's not dropping the ball properly. And to me, that screams that his groin isn't right. Now,
if he's carrying injury, then yeah, drop him for sure. But otherwise, I don't think form is enough.
Because he's one of the guys I trust in terms of mentally being tough. And I suspect that I just watch the way he plays, and something isn't right. And I put more money on it being a physical injury rather than a mental incapacity at the moment. Mental incapacity sounds bad, but a mental issue.
And I guess the selection which has put online forums into meltdown is the omission of the man, the crack, Nathan Cracker.
Don't understand
Did you guys,
that one.
You don't understand it?
No.
Do you understand it, Portia?
The only thing I can perhaps assume is that maybe someone at Collingwood has indicated interest, Shea or Amon, and that they want to see them play. I don't know. I have no idea. I can't think why Cracker would be dropped unless there's some sort of injury they don't want to talk about or something else. I don't know. It's baffling, but I don't think it's necessarily game changing. I don't know.
Something out of the corner of my eye last week that I noticed with Cracker is that for all his positives with his disposals, he did seem to lack a lot of defensive effort and a lot of just throwing the arm out there and everything else. So I don't know if that was really highlighted and as poor on Nathan's part, or if he's concealing an injury they don't want to disclose. But that's the only thing that I can think of, which really puts me in a quandary though, because Cam O'Shea's efforts in the Magpies have been pretty horrendous, and he's been just as bad for his attempts at tackling, and he's starting in the full back line. Now, I mean, if this decision lacks courage to me. If our selectors were going to be courageous, why not maybe give a player like Logan Austin, who I thought has performed admirably at SANFL level, an opportunity over Cam O'Shea if they're looking for a little bit more height in the back lines.
How long was Logan out for injured?
I don't know. I'm only just going on the bits that I see randomly because I am pretty busy. But I would have just probably preferred someone else other than O'Shea. Next, give someone else a go because I just don't think O'Shea's form deserved selection.
I think this is a classic, unfortunate history repeating of O'Shea basically having been given the Michael Pettigrew treatment in that Pettigrew spent years on the list where he'd only get a go when the team was a bit shaky and fucked up. And quite honestly, that's what's happening in this case. Yeah, I'm going to say it because it's O'Shea. I'm a bit annoyed about it. So bad luck.
Where's the mute? You're a lover of O'Shea. You've always been an O'Shea fan.
It's really frustrating how he's been handled by the club. So yeah, he's playing shit at the Magpies, and no wonder because the writing's been on the wall for a couple of years now that he hasn't got a future at Port Adelaide, and he should have left. He should have gone. You know, when all those rumours are going around about Richard Sinnott St Kilda saying I want O'Shea. I don't know if he actually did, but if he did, then that should have been straight out the door because he's not going to get a proper shot. It's pretty obvious at this point, and I think he's got a huge amount of potential. He's been a very valuable player for us in the past, but he's just being stuffed around now. So for his sake, I hope he changes clubs and does well.
Well, Al's in meltdown on Twitter. He can't believe that you're actually being serious about Tom Jonas and thinks he's been a massive liability. Al's head's spinning, I can see. Sorry, Nick, keep going.
I was going to say, I don't understand why O'Shea didn't play in the first few games. We took 5 guys into the season who played 1 quarter of pre-season footy. If you're going to play O'Shea, it's when the grounds are a bit dry and hard. That's the best time to play him, is to use his run. And I just didn't get his non-selection at the start of the season. I don't know whether he pisses Ken off with something, he doesn't do the right thing, or what. But I would have played O'Shea at the start of the season.
No
well,
disagreement
he did get a game at the start of the season, though, didn't he?
He might have got 1, but he didn't play in the first game. And he only got 1.
Yeah, and it was a pretty average game. He was coming off a poor form and really shouldn't have been selected in the first place and was selected and performed miserably. So it wasn't his fault for being selected in poor form. And again... It's happening again, and apparently the Palms are batting first. That's in a football forum as well. But I find that I do find the O'Shea selection interesting. I guess the other selection aspect, and this is where I'm a bit of an unashamed fan, Portia, aside from Jasper and Jackson, is Brendan Archie, who I thought had a very, very good first game, like full game in Port colours, and I'm a bit disappointed that we perhaps haven't given him a vote of confidence by actually starting him in the 18 on the ground, even if it's on paper, and maybe just given a little G up to someone who's in a little bit of a shaky form patch, like a Brad Ebert or a Matty Broadbent or the controversial Angus Momfries, and maybe just put one of them on the bench for the start of the game, just to give Brendan a bit more confidence. So, from my perspective, I don't think the coaches have really shown that much faith in him, and he's sort of had to really fight hard to create the faith himself.
I would argue that the club has shown enormous faith in him keeping around SANFL level for as long as they have developing him, and I don't think any players really believe that there's a difference between being named on the field and on the bench, unless it's a slap in the face for a very senior player suddenly being named on the bench. I guess I don't imagine that there's really any major concern about that.
I have no doubts about what you're saying, except for I'm just talking about the selection now that he's in the side, not in previous seasons. But I guess as a former sporting person, you do, if you're making your way, and I mean I'm talking pretty gross amateur level here, but I found more confidence when I was selected to start participating from the beginning compared to starting on the bench. And it sort of just goes, well, I'm really in it. The coach believes in me. Whereas on the bench, sometimes you can think, okay, well, okay, I'm playing, but maybe I don't have the complete confidence here. And I just thought starting a player like Brendan, a young player, on the ground, maybe even in the guts or wherever, could have just given that extra vote of confidence to Brendan as a player. What do you think, Nick?
I don't care if he starts on the bench. I just don't want him to start. I don't want him to start as sub. I'm pretty sure Mick Moldhouse at some point would say, Brendan, you go play on Josh Kennedy this week. You're starting on Josh Kennedy.
Yeah.
Mick Moldhouse was brilliant at taking a kid and giving him responsibility from his first game. And to me, Archie basically is about the only one big enough in the midfield who could have sat on Kennedy for a half. Kennedy might have pantsed him, but at least Brendan would have learnt, shit, this is how hard I have to work, this is where I run to, this is how tough this guy is. And I said, Mick Moldhouse would have done that. None of our coaches that we've had at Port, be it Choco, Primus and Ken, have had the guts to do that.
No, I totally agree. I think that's really been an issue for us, I suppose, since Jack Carl left. Jack Carl was really great at saying, here's a big job, do it. And I don't think we've had a lot of circumstances of that actually happening with our coaches, except if the players come on as a top 5 draft pick or something like that. Like Wines and Wingard are a huge exception in that regard, being given fairly significant responsibilities early on. But even they've started in secondary roles. We seem to almost think that you have to really, really earn the right to get the big jobs, and I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. Basically, I agree that if you give them a big job early, they'll know how hard they have to work to be good enough to beat them in the future. And I kind of wonder whether we talk about the players not having the confidence to do their role. I kind of wonder if this stage progression that we artificially create for them is part of the reason for that. The players that we have given a shot to do big jobs straight up, they've gone on and been quite good, but the ones that we sort of say, okay, you're going to start on the third best forward, and then occasionally we'll shift you off to the second. I'm just wondering whether that just sort of inhibits them, like they start to doubt themselves a little bit more because they have to earn their way up to the top, and then they get an attitude when they're there. I don't know, who knows? But yeah, I agree.
So sorry, Nick, I was just going to say, how are you guys feeling? No other Paddy, Jack Homch fullback, Jackson Trengove half back line, Cam O'Shea, Tom Cleary, Jarman Impey, Jasper Pittard. Are you guys happy with that defensive structure?
Well, it's as good as we've got.
Dane Swan's the one. I mean, obviously, Travis Quake's going to be hard, but Jacko or Jack Homch probably would do an okay job. But now, look, Swan went on to Hodge. It's his 250th game. He's a smart player, and don't be surprised if he kicks 3, 4, 5 goals off the half-forward flank. I don't think we've got anybody strong enough to hold him down. I mean, Luke Hodge struggled with him.
Yep.
Bevan wanted to know Portia, but I think Nick should have an opinion on this as well. I'm sure Nick would. Mitch Harvey, should he have been selected this week?
I don't know. There's a case for it, but with Ryder and Ryder fit and Schultz fit and Westhoff fit, then it's harder to make a case for it. But I do agree that certainly by year end, I'd like to have seen him play at least, say, 4 games whenever they come. So maybe this week could have been one of them, but I'd definitely like to see him play at least 3, 4 games before the end of the year at this point.
Nick?
I would have picked him and played Schultz half-back flank on Dane Swan. He seems to spend enough time down there.
Yeah.
Was anyone disappointed that Schultz didn't get a game just to see the opportunity of Harvey maybe playing?
No, I like the fact that Chook Lotto proved it's Chook Lotto. That was fantastic. I got more pleasure out of that than watching Schultz not play a game.
And Bevan thinks Jonas on Hodge in his first game is the only time he can remember it happening.
Jonas on Hodge?
Yeah, sort of having faith in a younger player to do a job.
Yeah, that's a fair call. Yeah, Jonas did get some big jobs early on. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously ours, one of the people, he's similar to me, has a bit of a phobia to rangers. He doesn't think Mitch Harvey should be picked because he's a ranger.
I know, I've got one. Actually, Ken did it a couple of times last year. Ken gave Impey some big jobs last year.
Yeah.
Eddie Betts, Ballantyne, because basically we didn't have anybody fast enough to go with them. So there's a case where, Ken wasn't scared, because what did he look? He looked at an 18-year-old kid, he's got blistering speed, and said, okay, the blistering speed is what we need, we'll stick him on there.
Yeah, and honestly, I think the guys that get the early jobs, that's where, Rick's talking about getting the confidence. I think that's where they get the confidence from, is that they come in and they learn what they got to do, and then they start doing it.
Look,
absolutely.
I'll go back to Malthouse. Now, I know this is midfielders compared to, say, I want Harvey to play. But look at Marty Clark from Ireland. Never played the bloody game. And the first 5 or 6 games, Malthouse plays them on the best midfielder of the opposition had. What a great learning experience, to quote Neil Craig.
I think that I totally agree with you on Malthouse. It's one of the things I respected most about him, is that the way that he gives those opportunities to the younger players, it actually is also really conducive to good list management as well, because rather than have a bunch of guys really, really slowly going through what is essentially it's an elite list that's very restricted in the number of players you can get through, you give them a crack, and if they're not up to it, you cut them and bring in some new guys, and you get some turnover, and you maximise your opportunities to find the gems in the rough, I think that from a coaching perspective it's good, and from list management I very much respect that, and I wish we did a bit more of that, quite honestly.
Well, Langford's another one at Hawthorn. I mean, here's a guy that was on the rookie list for 2 years, 2 and a bit years before he got a game. And then once he got a game, they threw him into the midfield, and basically they said, okay, you become the tagger, and he's become like a Kane. He's able to get a lot of his own ball and set up offensive opportunities whilst he's still tagging.
Awesome. So, who needs to stand up for Port Adelaide this week?
Everyone.
But if you're going to target somebody, who do you want to stand up to win us the game? Who does it need to be?
Well, it has to be Boak, and Boak has to get some help. So he doesn't. Boak is trying to do too much. All he has to do is, one, get a chop out from who's tagging him. Maybe the crowd can help him. If somebody tags him like the last few weeks, he's got to go and stand not in the goal square, but behind the goals and right up on the that LED sign and stuff like that, and especially at our end. Jump the fence. See if your tagger follows you up the stairs. Somehow break it up.
Hide behind the goalpost.
Get inside the tagger's head. Could you imagine if Boat jumped the fence and started walking up the aisle of 124 and his tagger came up with him? That would be an interesting bloody side game, and see how much you get inside the tagger's head.
I think there's a simpler solution to losing the tagger, and that is to have his teammates actually not chop him off when he runs past him. That's what we used to do. We do that so much now.
But they haven't been doing it, have they?
No, they haven't. And that's why that's the big problem there. If they're not supporting the guys being tagged, we're stuffed.
Who do you want to stand up for us to win the game, Portia?
Jackson Trengove. He's mine.
The man.
Yeah, well, I feel like he's due for a really good game. And given the emotion there's going to be in this game, because it's going to be there, we really need someone to just sort of hold it together and basically compete, but compete smart. And I look at that back line, and I think he's probably the only one I think could rise to the moment, and I really hope he does. And if he does, then we've got a shot. Yeah, I'd
and he has been a little bit iffy in form this year. I mean, he's a great player, and obviously injuries has created a bit of inconsistency there for him, and injuries to his loved ones as well, with his pet dog losing a leg. That's obviously going to be a distraction too. So yeah, I'm with you. I think he'll be pretty focused and steely, and I reckon he's going to have a strong second half of the season. I guess my concern is who are we going to run with Pendlebury? I mean, he's similar. Well, he's bigger than Kennedy, isn't he? And Kennedy reams us on a regular basis. And
he's taller than Kennedy, but he's not heavier than Kennedy.
No, but he's a fantastic player, and I'm a bit worried about that matchup. So I might go a little bit random here and say Paul Stewart might be my man to stand up, because I wonder if we might run Paul Stewart on Pendlebury at times to try and curtail his influence.
He's not named, is he?
Yeah, he's on the interchange bench.
Is he?
Yeah, he was one that
yeah,
survived.
he is. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
read the wrong line.
Well, and I'm glad he survived, Nick, because I thought
I think he deserves a second chance.
he did. And I thought out of the fringe players in the pre-season, Paul Stewart was actually our form fringe player in the pre-season.
He's another one that had 4 games in a row. No, 4 out of 5, because one of the games, bloody Tommy Logan took him out at the Anzac Day game. But he was a guy that should have been picked earlier. And when he finally was picked, his form was starting to go down. I thought for a guy who only had 4 days rest, he did a reasonable job up at the SCG. That's why I think he deserved to stay in there.
Absolutely. Portia would disagree.
Yep.
You got a vendetta against Paul Stewart, Portia.
Look, we talk about how we want the young blokes to get a go, and here's a classic example of why we're not getting the young blokes to give a go. We're keeping guys like Paul Stewart around. He's okay. His top end is not there. He's 27, 28 now. How much more time's he got? Not much.
But you still got a reward for.
These are games that we could be putting into one of the young blokes, and this is, or more specifically, this is game time that we could be putting into one of the young blokes like Amon or Need, or not Need in this case, but Amon's to certainly. Or Cleary to get him up to speed.
Cleary's
every minute
side as
counts.
Well. Who else? Cleary's in. Amon's in.
Yeah. Impey.
Need's in. Impey's in.
Shit, why not Brendan Archie on Pendlebury? Why not?
Archie's in.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is that you can't shut all the midfielders down.
No.
The problem against Sydney was their best 3 players and probably their best 4 players were midfielders. And it went, and we didn't shut any of them down. There went Kennedy, Hanbury, Jack, Parker, and we didn't shut one of them down. That was the trouble. If you say Gray plays on Kennedy, so that's going to be a win for both. Both will get 30 odd disposals. Then we had to shut down one of Jack. Probably not Jack, because he tends to play the negative role as well as go forward. But probably had to have someone sit on Hanbury or Parker.
It's one of those cost things that you have to worry about. So for every tagger you have in the midfield, that's production you're losing. And Port Adelaide has very much been set up as a production side. Like, we need to have as many opportunities going forward as we can, and they're mostly coming through defence, because that's the way we're set up to play. So if you have every extra person you tag, that's an extra unit in the line that is not going to be part of that forward production. So there's a reason, I would say, why we don't tag as much as we have in the past. Not only that, but obviously we don't have the personnel quite up to it at this point. But yeah, it's a problem, but that's a problem not just of the day, but also our style of play. We need to compensate for it.
If you basically Pendlebury and Gray have the same output, that effectively negates each other. It's the next ones down that we have to make sure that you don't have 2 or 3 Pendlebury type outputs.
Brody Grundy's not playing, so I think they're only taking Wits in. Are we maybe going to have a late change? Will we lose one of the rucks maybe and bring in another small?
Nah, can't see it.
Well, no, I can't see that change happening. And if anything, this is one of the opportunities for the lobby rider to redeem themselves, to actually go up against a relatively weak ruck core. And if they can't do well in this game, well, then we know there's something wrong. We need to look at it. I think it's worth keeping them both in, just for that perspective alone.
If it comes to poaching coaches, one that flies under the radar, who's in a fantastic system, is bloody Ironmonger at Hawthorn. He's been there for years, and
you talking about Johnny Ironmonger, the guy that
he played for Collingwood. He was a big lump of a man. I think he got done. Monkhurst, that's the one. Sorry, yeah. Now I'm with it.
Johnny Ironmonger, you're talking Fitzroy in the 80s.
Sorry, I'm showing my age now, aren't I? And Monkhurst. But I mean, again, in a great system, he'd have great intellectual property, and any ruckman that goes to Hawthorn, he's able to convert them into a fantastic ruckman. It's on my wishful thinking dream list here, but it's something left of centre, sort of trying to poach some IP. I think he would be sort of a great target to try and get. I'm with you, Portia. If our rucks can't stand up and deliver, unless it's bucketing down with rain tomorrow, which I don't think it is, we need to really have a look at what's going on there.
Yes, I'm not sure that a ruck coach is what's needed though. I think that's again focusing on skill rather than game plan, and I think game plan is where we've really got weaknesses.
Yeah, I agree with you there, but I know Nick's a very fond advocate of having a defensive player as a defence coach and a ruckman that's as a ruck coach, and I guess we are lacking majorly at our stoppage setup, and surely a ruck coach and the midfield coaches need to get together and improve or be replaced. I guess that would be my point.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got a lot. We've had I suppose, in the secondary coaching field, we've had a lot of stability. Like, we've still got a bunch of coaches from when Matty Primus was the head coach. Maybe it's time to have a look at that and see what's going on. I'd really love to see some kind of audit where they just go around and ask every coach and say, okay, what's your job? What are you doing? Do you think you did good? And then you say, how did you measure it? How did you measure that you've done good? How is it evidenced? How can we see it? Because I'm not convinced that there's going to be any metrics behind it at all. I don't know what's going on. But just on the point about defenders coaching the defensive team, I totally agree with that, because I'd say at least 80% of coaching is about teaching good decision making, and I don't see how someone that hasn't been a defender can understand the decision making that a defender makes in the same degree as someone that has. So I'm totally on board with that one.
Awesome. All right, well, we better start our conclusion, because between the two of you, I know it's going to take 10 minutes anyway. I'm sorry, I've got to get it in. I've got the power too, so I can mute everybody. And I know Al wants to quickly call in at some stage, so I'm expecting a call very shortly. Key to winning from both of you, and who's going to win?
Midfield.
Yeah.
Well, that was easy.
and kicking good. Kicking efficiently and effectively.
Well, now that Jonas is out, our disposal efficiency will go up. Ooh.
Oh, you reckon?
I'd
be surprised.
That was harsh.
How's kicking going, Rick?
Well, he's been out, mate. He's been injured. So, Jackson, leave Jacko alone. He's a fantastic player and he's got great skills. He's a great man. Defend him all the way.
I'm just going on Piston Broke's comments about his kicking when he was in before he got injured.
You're talking about Jackson New Vision Trengove, aren't you?
That's the one. Piston Broke has a lot of comments about his kicking.
Jackson's all right. He's the size of a ruckman, so every now and again the hand-to-foot ratio or timing gets a bit out of whack, but he's a good man.
Yeah. But just on the keys to win, I totally agree that midfield is a big part of it. But I think that the key to not losing is probably the way I'd put it, is just keeping control of the emotion that's going to be in the game. I think that's probably the main thing we need to do, is just make sure that the guys don't lose their heads a bit, because I think that's a very real possibility.
Oh, we've got a caller.
Okay.
We do have a caller. Caller, just hold on for one moment, because I agree we need to keep our head, but I actually think the tragedy of Phil Walsh will be a positive motivator for the boys this week, and I'm expecting a blood rush of the vein of Hawthorn in the first quarter, the Hawthorn game, and it's just going to be a matter of, does the rest of the game pan out like that, or do we continue on with it? Alistair Clarkson, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Oh, sorry, Alistair Carlton, once again. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks, guys. How about yourselves? Good show so far today, but I've just got to say, Portia. Jonas. He, even if he didn't play last week, we would have done better. Even if he didn't get anything about playing, even putting a Logan Austin, a Cam O'Shea back there, we would have got something more than what we got last week from Tom Jonas. He was the biggest liability on that field, and every moment that he was on the field. I actually sat there and actually watched him specifically after our conversation, and I was like, wow, I can't wait to get the opportunity to rebut the Portia, because his game last week was terrible.
No, was anyone's game really all that good? I'm not saying he played brilliantly, but I certainly would doubt that Logan Austin would come in and be particularly good either, and particularly not in that exact same role. But most importantly, I just don't think he's going to learn anything at SANFL.
Don't deflect it onto me. Now you're deflecting. Huh? You're deflecting now because I'm an advocate for I'm an advocate for Logan Austin over Cam O'Shea. And you're deflecting.
I was the one that said Logan Austin.
I said Logan Austin. I said Logan Austin or Cam O'Shea. It doesn't matter. Either of them would be a better contributor than what Tom Jonas is at the moment. If he's injured, fair enough. Or if he's not injured, he's in such poor form that nearly anybody... We're playing with 21 players with him at the moment.
We were.
We're not anymore, so that's great.
I think Al's right there, Portia.
I still disagree with the reason that he gave last week, which was that he would find confidence at SANFL level and come back better. I don't think that would actually happen. I think injury, if he's got an injury, that could do it. But as far as SANFL form being anything to gain confidence from for a senior AFL player, it's not going to make any difference. It won't be a good thing at all.
All right, well, thanks for the call, Al.
No worries, guys.
I'm going to hang up on you now because we've got to wrap it up. But appreciate the feedback. And look, I think what's the result going to be? I'm obviously going to go Port this week, and I'm going to think we're going to win by 37 points.
I hate to say it, I'm going to say Collingwood by about 40.
If that's the case, I'm going to be very, very drunk by the end of the night because I'm just going to take advantage of the provided alcohol instead. Nick?
Yeah.
I think it'll be a 2-goal game either way, and I'm not sure that we're good enough to get over the line, but we won't give in because we haven't given in. Just I don't think we're good enough, but I'll say 2 goals. And if we win, it'll only be 2 goals as well.
I guess if we win, it's just going to give those that have a little bit of hope that we can make finals a continued hope. And Al also tweeted in before he called up, what are the KPI for coaches? Well, I think that's pretty simple. Victories and losses, isn't it? If we're winning,
not for secondary coaches, senior coach, sure, but but even for the senior coach, it's not. There should be other goals beyond that. List development for a start. How many backups do you have
that's
for
the
each
list
position that are AFL ready? No, because
that's the list manager's job now, though.
Oh, in part it is, but all of this stuff is still headed up by the head coach. It's foolish to pretend that there's not some head coach intervention in these things. It's not like
a little bit, but the list managers basically look at Hawthorn with Pelchin. I mean, basically they've got full reign and control of selection. They just have to go with, I think, with what the coach
possibly, but even that'll be within guidelines, and it also won't affect the AFL readiness of the list that's already there. Like getting games into guys like Harvey so that next year you can say, well, we've got a couple of KPPs ready to key position forwards ready to go this year, as opposed to where you don't play any of them and then you go, well, we don't really know anything about any of our backups.
Nick?
That's coaching. Sorry.
That's all right.
We got to you've got to measure what your assistant coaches do, and I guess there'd be some things like you look at improvement. And that improvement, obviously you can measure it both at AFL and SANFL level, but there must be what's the word I'm looking for? There must be programs for each player set out at the start of the year. You would think, and you would measure it against that. I'm sure the AFL Coaches Association would have these beautiful PowerPoint slides about how you can measure assistant coaches. I'm sure that's something we could dig into and find out, hack into one of these days and find out. But fundamentally, you've got to be about your player development. I mean, I would give Edwards a cross for what the hell has happened to Monfries. Now, I know there's all the drug stuff and that could be handing over his head, but why the hell are we turning somebody can kick goals into a tagging half forward? That doesn't make any sense to me. Now, if that comes from Ken, then that's not Edwards' fault. But if Edwards has driven that, then he deserves a big kick up the backside for it.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there. We've gone a fraction over time. Thank you very much for coming on. I know a lot of people were excited to hear it, and I know a lot of people will probably download it tomorrow and tune in. But Portia, once again, thank you very much for your contribution. It's been greatly appreciated, and never apologise for wanting to contradict what I'm saying, because you're always right. But the problem is I'm always right. But I'm always right, so something's going on there. And Nick, thank you very much. It's been a while since we've been on the same show. I think we did it once last year, so appreciate you coming on. Everyone have a great time tomorrow night if you're going or watching it on TV. I'll be there. I'm going to cheer them on. It'll be interesting to see what the crowd is. And thank you very much for your support, guys. And go the Power.
Go Port.
Go Port.
Oh, so unenthusiastic. Power!
Carlisle sends it long. Modlop just on and takes the mark. He can give Port Adelaide the lead. Hamstring hurt. Plays on. Sends it high. Goal square. Long. McVeigh gets back. Port Adelaide in front. The magic man of all people. He had to be the